In today's episode, we're going to be talking about RIDDOR, what you need to know about it, the things you should be looking at within your business, when to report, what to report, pros and cons of should you report, shouldn't you report. So I'm joined today by Ian Hatherley, and we're going to look into it a little bit further. So first question then, Ian, what actually is RIDDOR?
Well, the mouthful of the legislation, the reporting of injuries, diseases and dangerous occurrence regulations, but no one really knows that, so just go with RIDDOR. Ultimately, it's legislation that sets out certain types of injuries, dangerous occurrences, diseases that we can touch on that ultimately are reportable to the health and safety executive, which is generally done by an online form.
So why were they introduced? What is the point? Why did the HSE want to know about certain incidents?
So there's certain topics that the health and safety executive wants to be aware of. They want to be aware of higher risk areas, so ultimately they can build, some statistics around what is causing a problem from a health and safety point of view for industries, and they can then target their potential approach to either assist with compliance, be that through legislation and regulation, or also from an enforcement point of view where they know that an employer maybe hasn't met the standards that are required and they want to look into what solutions they might be able to provide for that.
Yes, I suppose they're looking across industry with that data as to what target areas, what are we looking at? Are we having more falls from height that are leading to fractures, manual handling injuries arising? So looking at the types of things. So
yeah, and they will target across industry. So when you complete a RIDDOR report, you're basically selecting your sector that you're within. And that gives them the information of what to target. And as you mentioned, it gives good idea of the stats. The biggest workplace killer is unfortunately always falls from height, or has been for as long as I've been in health and safety. Yeah. And that's where these statistics come from.
So these are less focused. The reason to report is less focused around the type of incident. It's more around the outcome, isn't it?
Correct. Yes.
So we can just kind of go over what things are required to be reported.
Okay, so they split them out with what they call specified injuries. So specified injuries cover elements such as fractures to arms, legs. They don't interestingly cover fractures to fingers. So they're all right. Crack on, break as many fingers as you want.
Good pub question.
Yeah, exactly. Covers things like loss of consciousness. It covers certain burns. It will cover if someone's scalped. So lots of kind of a list of things that you need to look at. That's the kind of first part. So that's what they call a specified injury.
We've missed the first one, fatality.
Yes, true, true. That's unfortunately your worst case scenario.
Yeah.
And we'll get on to kind of some ins and outs around the concept of was it actually work related or commensurate with work activity. And then the second kind of big section is what they call over 7 days. So that could be any injury at work where the employee is unable to do their normal work activity for over 7 days. So that then could bring in fractured fingers because someone's then not at work for over 7 days and it becomes reportable.
If they're a pianist, for instance.
Correct. That would be challenging for them, I guess. But they'll have good insurance on their fingers probably, so they'll be all right.
So this is a bit of a pyramid, isn't it? I remember many moons ago being at university, your fatality data is obviously usually 100% reliable. It's very hard to hide a fatality. So the police are often involved, HSE are involved, local authority involved. You're then moving down into your specified injuries where there's a more grey area of what gets actually reported. We're then moving into our over 7 days now. It used to be 3 days a long time ago. And it's now we're looking at the scenario of less is getting reported as you move further down. And then we move beyond injury, don't we, into the occurrences part of the regulations.
Yeah, so dangerous occurrences are again defined in the regulations. They don't tend to kind of change, but something like failure of lifting equipment. So if an element of lifting equipment, such as a forklift truck that is responsible for the actual lift, if that fails, that's reportable under RIDDOR as a dangerous occurrence.
Overturn is as well, isn't it? Is it overturn of lift truck still in there?
Overturn, and you sometimes get in the semantics there. If a forklift truck's resting on its forks, it's not overturned. Yeah. But if it's lying on its side, you have overturned it. Yeah. So there's lots of nuances within RIDDOR where you do need a bit of experience. You potentially need to get a bit of advice. Because for reasons we'll probably get onto, you don't really want to over-report. The law's there to report. So if it's reportable, we would always recommend you report. But equally, there's a lot of grey areas in RIDDOR that you can
there's some
avoid.
structural ones as well, aren't there? I think there's like wall collapse, racking collapse. Again, it has to be significant amounts, doesn't it? It can get quite nuanced. I think there's also gas release and things like that come into it.
I mean, as a safety consultancy, there's not a day stroke week that doesn't go by where we don't debate RIDDOR in the office. So, and we've got the luxury of a team of experienced consultants. But some businesses where you might be the lone one person band safety person, you might not have that experience that you can have to kind of glean what works. And a lot of us being ex regulators as well, it kind of helps to know where this sits and works.
And it's understanding as well, isn't it, what the HSE are trying to look for. I speak to some people in the health and safety world who have got this mantra of over-reporting, essentially. They want to report everything. Well, the HSE actually don't want to hear about things that don't fit into the category, otherwise you're then skewing their data. So it's
yeah, correct. It's a data issue. You also have to look at the fact that the health and safety executive, when you're reporting too much, if I'm sat there at the other end as the inspector and it's landed on my desk, at some point am I thinking, well, do these guys actually know what they're doing, or are they just firing reports in? And some sectors have traditionally been quite bad for that in over-reporting. Education springs to mind, often a want to report more things than are actually needed.
Yeah. No, absolutely. The one bit that we've missed before we kind of move off the definition of them is the diseases element as well. So there are a number of reportable diseases which the reporting timeline can often be a lot longer. Things like asbestosis and noise-related occupational health issues. You've got a longer reporting window.
Yeah, things like hand-arm vibration.
Yeah.
So a build-up really, and these have to be diagnosed by a doctor. I think that's critical. Yeah. We will often get approached with, for example, someone saying, I think I've suffered hand-arm vibration from using sanding tools in a joinery. Yeah. And that may be so, but you need to have a diagnosis before you actually put that RIDDOR in. And again, getting those facts straight is really important, because what you've got to imagine is once you submit that RIDDOR report, essentially what happens is it goes to a contact centre, and that then gets sent to either the health and safety executive, or if the local authority are the enforcing body, it will get sent to them, and then it lands up on someone's desk. So it's then in the domain, it's in the system. So you want to make sure that if you're going to submit it, you needed to submit it and not just submit for the sake of it.
Yeah, and I think kind of coming back to some of those grey areas then of that reporting, what do we see that people get wrong, I suppose, is the question I'm looking for. Is where are people either over-reporting or misreporting certain things? I think the key one that I've seen over the years is making sure that it relates to the work activity a lot of the time.
Yeah, that's the most common element we see. So for it to be reportable under RIDDOR, it has to be connected with the work activity. So if you want to take your kind of extreme example of a fatality, someone's unfortunately suffered a heart attack at work, and they were in the kind of normal working mode, that's not reportable under RIDDOR, because it's kind of in effect got nothing to do with the business. Yeah. But a lot of people, including qualified safety professionals, instantly think about the injury or the outcome before they actually think whether it was connected to the work activity. And that's the question that you should always ask yourself. Another example might be, I'm walking across a yard, I'm walking across a warehouse, and I'm just not concentrating. I trip over my own feet and I break my leg. Now, a broken leg is a specified injury under RIDDOR. Yep. But if there was nothing wrong with the floor surface, nothing wrong with my boots, etc., then why am I reporting it? It's just someone who's unfortunately fallen over their own feet because they've not been concentrating, which happens all the time. So it's really key to kind of take it that step back, not panic, and just make a calm assessment of whether it needs reporting, and then report it within the appropriate timescales.
Another interesting example that often crops up here is who is responsible and what the workplace is, where we have like deliveries. So a delivery driver arriving at a business, they have an injury on your site. Are you reporting it, or is their employer reporting it? We often get that question, don't we?
Yeah, and it's down to who's ultimately responsible for the site. So if you kind of build on that example, if I'm a one-person operation, I'm self-employed and I get injured on your site, then it's your responsibility, as you're in control of the site, to report that RIDDOR. If I'm employed as a driver within the business and I have that same injury on site, then it's my employer's responsibility to do that report. And that often gets quite murky. And our view would always be, well, if it's your responsibility, why would you not want to report it, in terms of you want to be in control of what's in that report? A lot of the time we see people trying to pass the buck and go, oh, well, it's their responsibility. My view is, okay, well, they're going to complete the RIDDOR now. You've got no control over what they're going to write into it. It becomes a document that's been submitted, and before you know...
They've mentioned your site was in a poor condition,
Correct.
or you've got problems, or you weren't controlling the delivery environment. We've seen those kind of things. So controlling the narrative, I suppose, there really, isn't it? You've got that control, haven't you, of what's going in there, getting ahead of it, really, which we'll come on to, really, in terms of what happens. Touching a little bit then, this question, I suppose, isn't it, we're raising, bleeding into this idea of, does it put a target on your back? It's probably a little bit overzealous, but reporting's always going to attract attention. We've both been regulators over the years, and the old got the old filing cabinet. Your boss puts them on your desk, like, these are a bunch of RIDDORs that have come through this morning. You've got to decide which ones you're going to go and visit if they're on your patch.
Yeah, exactly. And inspectors are busy. There's less inspectors than when we were enforcement officers, so you've got to be more selective. Now, generally they'll often work on enforcement criteria, so if it's a fatality that's work-related, you would be exceptionally lucky, in inverted commas, if it didn't get investigated and someone didn't turn up. But if it's something like an over 7-day injury due to manual handling, for example, you might not hear from them at all. So getting that information in, but having an awareness of whether you're going to get a visit is always useful. And generally, the more significant the injury, the bigger impact it's going to have. Yeah. And on the kind of disease side of it, it will often be topic-based. There's been a lot of focus on the health element of health and safety.
Absolutely.
So when someone is submitting a RIDDOR around hand-arm vibration, occupational hearing loss, those elements around it, that's when the needle's going to get moved, and you're going to get more of a trigger. But even then, sometimes it comes down to potluck.
And different. Obviously, we're not touching on today really, but the difference between HSE and local authority has a big influence. Whether you're getting an EHO enforcing your site or whether it's a HSE enforced site, very different approaches. Some of them I'm seeing are paper-based. You'll receive a questionnaire that asks you some questions about the incident, where they're trying to gather that information before even coming out. And another opportunity, but the thing I've always done when submitting a RIDDOR is thinking, when I was in my old seat, what am I looking for when I'm triaging the pile of RIDDORs that I've got to go and visit? So any enforcement officers looking, can I add value, is the way I try and perceive it, by going out to that site or asking more questions. Now, you as the submitter of that RIDDOR need to be ruling out that value that they can add, explaining the incident in detail, why you think it would happen. Essentially, verbalising your accident investigation is the way I would approach it. Would you agree?
There's a real art to RIDDOR, and that's why we at Opus Safety always aim to submit these for our clients, because if a client has one incident a year or one every 2 years where they need to RIDDOR report it, the experience isn't built up there on what to write, because essentially you've got to imagine when 3 similar incidents land on an inspector's desk or regulator's desk, they've probably only got the time to investigate one. So I want to load that RIDDOR report with as much good stuff as I can, what I've done since the incident, etc., to give that regulator confidence that actually we do know what we're doing, and yes, this has happened, but also we've got solutions in place to maybe prevent it happening again. Or if we were already doing everything that was reasonably practicable, we've reminded the team about what's happened and we've briefed them, etc., to get that kind of information in. So there is this real art to doing it. So I would caution against just people just firing RIDDORs in without considering what the impact of that text they're writing might be at the other end. And if you kind of flip it over to the civil side of the law, which is something I'm sure we'll cover on future podcasts, but from a civil claims point of view, a claims solicitor can use that RIDDOR report to potentially strengthen the case for their client, i.e. the person who's been injured. So it really requires some thought, and even with all our experience within the business, often we will still get a second opinion off one of the other team. We don't just go gung-ho with it.
We're looking at those dominoes, aren't you? What's the incident? What happened? Why shouldn't it have happened? What does your risk assessment cover? So have you shown that you've gone through all of those steps? Were all those control measures in place? Which control measure was breached? So what didn't happen? Was the employee not following a control measure? What have you done since? Reaffirmment of current control measures, improvement of control measures. So you're giving that inspector the confidence that actually this shouldn't have happened, why it did happen, and why you're going to stop it from happening again are the kind of steps that I go through.
Yeah, you're in effect doing. Our customers will say to us, "What have I got to expect?" We'll do kind of dry runs with them, so they've got an idea. But essentially, you may not do an incident investigation for absolutely everything, but once it's RIDDOR reportable, you're generally doing some sort of incident investigation about what's happened. So you shouldn't be that surprised by the questions that the regulator might ask you when they visit or if they visit, because you've built up that triaging of what you've done and what you needed to do. So nothing should really come out as a real surprise.
No, I think it's just being prepared, isn't it? That they could come knocking, they could come unannounced. So it could happen tomorrow, it could happen next week, depending on the seriousness of the incident. And they're going to want to be walked through, aren't they? Where's the scene of the incident, etc. They're going to want to talk to the injured party if they exist. They're going to want to talk to witnesses if there are any. Be talked through how it happened, what you think the hazards are, what you think the controls are, and then the training element, and then any physical documentation if there's lift trucks involved, the Lolas, all of that information. So it's having that ready. I know we've run mock accident investigations before, and that includes elements of HSE intervention as well. So it's good to go take your team through that, especially if you're a multi-sited operator, working through what might happen, what your team should expect, and how you are going to take them through that journey. But at the same time, being guarded that actually, look, there's a situation here where you could become prosecuted if we go down that road, or it could lead to an improvement notice or a prohibition notice. So we're kind of thinking about what those next actions might be, which we'll cover in a little while.
Yeah, and I think it's important as well that when you're prepping the team for it, a lot of health and safety is, yes, you can do the risk assessments, you're trying to build on the team following the safe procedures you've put in place, but then a lot of it comes down for a regulator and a safety professional comes down to confidence in management. And whilst we're there to assist our client base and help them through this process, ultimately the person who greets that regulator on the day of the visit is the person that the regulator's going to quiz, in inverted commas.
Yeah.
So even the simple things about knowing where to find your risk assessments, knowing where to access the training.
Sign them into the site.
Exactly.
Make sure they've got the right PPE on.
Correct.
Don't be afraid to tell them I've got to wear PPE, in my experience.
Exactly.
All of those things, it's about confidence in management, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly. So knowing that our clients who use Opus Compliance Cloud and a software system like that, that really helps them. And they just need to be comfortable that they navigate through it and they go, well, this is all my information, because that's what they're trying to do. They want the regulator to see, well, actually, these guys are switched on, and hopefully this will be an investigation where the regulator can take the view of, okay, I can walk away from this, because ultimately they do have a duty. So they're not just turning up for the sake of it. They've got a duty to check that the public and the employees are being protected. And if they are, they'll be quite happy to close the book on it and move on to the next one.
It kind of takes me back as well to some of the older boys that trained me a long time ago. There's this phrase certainly in EHOs with if the gate's hanging off the house is probably unfit. So don't just think about the accident they've come to investigate. Think about your entire business. What's the impression that someone's going to get when they turn up at your business? Is everybody wearing their PPE? Are you signing them in? Is the yard tidy, clean? Is the warehouse in good condition? All of those things. It's a rounded approach, remember. If they spot something different, it might not be the thing that they came to investigate, but you can open up that wedge by having another issue on site.
Correct, yeah.
What actually happens if you don't submit a report? What are the consequences of of reporting?
It's a bit of a roll of the dice, really. We are there to...
Well, firstly, nothing happens, does it, if you don't get caught?
If no one finds out, nothing's going to happen. The law requires you to report. It's a strict liability offence. So if you don't report and you found out, technically you could get prosecuted, and it would be the easiest prosecution in the world from that point of view. Relying on the fact that no one we'll find out is relatively risky strategy, because if it's a significant injury, or it's likely that on the civil side of it there might be a claim that's submitted.
Yep, any civil lawyer is going to.
They will ask for the RIDDOR report. And if someone then wants to shop you, another employee wants to just put in an anonymous complaint to the health and safety executive. Oh, was this RIDDOR reportable? It's a dangerous game to play. So it's always safer and advisable to put that report in. And as we've touched on already, what then happens depends on the injury, depends where they will go, but you have complied with that element of the law. But it does bring me back to make sure that it is reportable under RIDDOR, because ultimately, if you're going for something like a tender where you're trying to win work, when your insurance comes up for renewal, the sort of questions you will be asked is around your accident statistics and around how many RIDDOR reportable injuries you have had. And that may put the premium up. It might be that another business wins the tender because the price was the same, but actually your accident history is worse. So
it's worse off getting prosecuted, though.
Yeah, exactly.
That is going to be listed. You know, if you're doing a tender and you say, actually, we have had a RIDDOR, this is how we dealt with it, this is the process that we've gone through, I don't think that's unacceptable. I think you'll find a lot. You know, there are a lot of RIDDOR incidents that are reported every year. You know, it's not a carte blanche negative against you as a business. You're doing what's required. So I don't see a downside. You know, consequences of not reporting, I think, are much higher if you get caught. So you don't want to be in that situation. Yeah,
and the kind of the ostrich effect of I didn't know isn't going to wash.
No,
you know, that might have washed when we started in health and safety, but now we're in, you know, this more dynamic age. There's more information available on the internet, the health and safety executive website. There's no real I didn't know defence is not a thing.
And I think the interesting thing that we'll touch on now really is so if the HSE do turn up, we've gone in that scenario, we've reported something and they come to visit site, we've now got this idea of fee for intervention, which came out a long time ago now actually. And can you just talk us through what that means? So it's only the HSE, local authority don't actually charge, but the fee for intervention is actually a chargeable time, isn't it, by HSE?
Yeah, so currently the local authorities you mentioned don't charge. The health and safety executive basically can start the clock on charging when they identify what they call a material breach. It's essentially a breach of health and safety law. At that point, if they're on site, for example, they will generally inform the business to say, look, we think there's a material breach here. And they're then basically starting the clock on the time that they have to spend on that investigation, which could be the time on site, it can be the time to write letters, the time to do research. And the figures are not insignificant. You know, they do go up every year. They're at the moment above £180 per hour. Yeah. And that can quickly rack up. You know, you've only got to think yourself, if I sit down and write a letter and I've got to do a bit of research, suddenly that's 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 hours. So before you know it, you've had an incident, you've now had a bill of a few £1,000s on top, and we have seen big bills from the health and safety executive under fee for intervention in the tens of thousands of pounds that rack up. The health and safety executive had to justify it quite clearly, and if you don't think it's justified, then there is a process you can go through and you can push back. But ultimately, you need to be kind of careful on that. And that feeds into the fact that no one wants to have injuries, no one wants to have incidents. No. But ultimately, you do want to be doing your best to prevent these, because the health and safety executive, they can't just make this stuff up. If there's a material breach, there's a material breach. And it's not that difficult to make sure that you don't have a material breach. No. So you just need to put those steps in place to help you further down the line and ultimately save you a lot of money.
And then obviously with the types of intervention that the HC can then make, typically they would then move to potentially an advice letter, or after that we're looking at improvement notice and then potentially prohibition notice. Just talk me through what the difference between those sort of options are.
Yeah, so letter's what it says on the tin. That's saying you've got some material breaches, this is what evidence we've got, and this is what, often they'll say, what we propose you do, put it right.
And if you've got a good working relationship, that's kind of where you want to be, isn't it? You want to be trying to get advice out of the HSE or the local authority inspector to just say, look, we're going to do these things, give them the confidence that they believe you will action these items, and you can get an advice letter.
Yeah, an improvement notice is a bit more serious in inverted commas, i.e. the health and safety executive is saying, look, you've got a breach, and we're so concerned about it that we want you to put it right, and we're going to give you a certain timescale to put it right, and to make sure that you do, we're going to serve an improvement notice. That becomes public record. You can search for them on the Health and Safety Executive website. So again, it feeds into things like tenders and wanting to make sure that ideally you haven't got these against your name, and they could be for the fact you might have no risk assessments, so therefore you've not complied with the regs, and they do an improvement notice for you to have those risk assessments done. Could be an element around guarding, and they'll give you certain timescales.
And they're more likely to, in my experience, I was always more likely to serve an improvement notice if I'd got no confidence. If I felt the people that I'm talking to aren't going to do what I think they should be doing, I'd more likely to move to an improvement notice.
Yeah, because also then it's easier than a letter. If you've got to take enforcement action further down the line, your kind of worst case scenario prosecution, having that improvement notice in place, if you don't meet the timescales and you haven't asked for an extension, etc., again, it's an offence.
It's a strict liability offence then, isn't it?
It's a very easy offence to take. You haven't done it. And also, as the regulator, if you think it's so serious, then you should be doing something to demonstrate that you think it's serious. Otherwise, your case, in effect, is weakened further down the line, potentially. And your kind of most serious scenario is your apart from prosecution is your prohibition notice, and that is where there is a serious risk of injury to health. Lots of different scenarios where they might serve a prohibition. It could be something like an unguarded machine where the health and safety executive have walked in and felt that this machine is so far away from the guidance, the British standards, and people are working so close to it that they could get seriously injured, potentially amputation, something like that. And they serve a prohibition notice on that machine, which stops you using it.
Or the activity or the process or whatever.
Correct. And that prohibition notice, in effect, is then in place forevermore. You don't actually comply with it technically. You just have to put it right so you can start using that machine in this example again by potentially putting a better guarding system on it.
And they are very serious. PNs, you are serving that because there's risk of serious injury at that point that you've seen as an inspector. So, if you get a PN, you really do need to comply with that, or you need to be thinking about how you're going to appeal, but it does stay in place while you're doing the appeal. So it's, if you're using someone like us to support you because it's going to stop the use of your business, that's, that can become quite critical. I've dealt with them before, unfortunately, where an inspector is putting a PN in place and actually it's not tight enough. What you want as a business owner is to make sure that the prohibition notice is not going to restrict more than it absolutely needs to. So, if you can work around something, obviously you don't want to injure anybody, that's great, but you want to make sure that it's not so widely worded that it's going to prevent you from perhaps even going into an area of your building or from using your yard or from using your offices. Think about trying to negotiate with that officer to make sure that it is only dealing with the thing that's got the potential to cause serious harm.
Agreed.
Well, thank you. I think that's been good. I think we've covered a number of different topics there. I think there's a lot more you can dive into, as you probably know. But I think there's a lot to think about from a RIDDOR perspective.
Yeah, there certainly is, and I think the most important element is go back to the regs if you're not sure. Check what you're doing is correct. Get some advice. Don't over-report. I mean, one thing we probably should briefly touch on is reporting times. So, fatality, your worst case scenario, you're reporting as soon as, which in our world means, look, once you've established that it's work related, that report needs to go in. In practice, the health and safety executive might already be there. So, because once you've dialed 999, which you probably have, the call handlers will often ring the health and safety executive. So if they're around and they've got capacity, they might come out. For a specified injury, you've got up to 10 days. And don't fire that in after 2 days if you don't need to. Build your facts up, get the information right, make sure it's reportable, have your investigation started and then put the report in, because whilst unlikely with a specified injury, the health and safety executive could turn up the very next day.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, if they happen to be in the area, then there's no.
Correct. And your final kind of one on the injuries, your over 7 day injuries, that's where you've got 15 days to put that report in. And again, use that time wisely. Ultimately, yes, if you can get it in on day 8, get it in on day 8.
Yeah.
But don't put it in just because someone's been signed off work for 2 weeks, because you never know, they might come back after 5 days. So
that's
use
a
your
very
tactics on
interesting
that.
one we didn't cover earlier. Actually, people over-reporting because they've got a sick note, and then the person decides to come back to work, etc. So it's
and
being
they put
clear.
the RIDDOR in.
Yeah.
And a lot of the time, we will get experienced safety professionals who we work with because they're using our software or they want a bit more support, whatever it might be, and they are ready to fire that report in after day 2. And we're like, let's just calm down here, because also you're buying yourself the time, and you're not doing anything wrong.
No,
it's there for
the
a
reporting
reason.
is for data primarily, and it's understanding actually, did that person come back to work? Could they do their normal duties? Just because the doctor's given them a 2-week sick note, but actually they become fit enough to work, then you haven't breached RIDDOR. You're not required to report it.
Yeah, and you end up in all sorts of strange scenarios where you need to have that bit of experience around someone's actually on holiday. Could they be back? You get into these weird bits where you've got to pick the phone
Shift
up to them.
Shift patterns is another one, isn't it?
You've got to pick the phone up to them and say, look, if you weren't on holiday now, could you be at work? Yes, I could. Well, there you go. You would have been back at work within that period. So there's lots of things you come across that you just need to navigate your way through.
Yeah, no, they're very nuanced, and you get into those technicalities of that detail and making sure you're not over-reporting. Really important.
Yeah.
Well, thanks very much, Ian. That's been really useful. I think we've covered a lot of ground there in the sort of 20-odd minutes that we've been going. Really useful information, very clear, but at the same time, there's a lot to think about.